This is Maj Christina Rusnock. This video is titled Street Signs and Breadcrumbs. It covers Chapter 6 from Steve Krug's Don't Make Me Think, Revisited. In this video, we're going to go over how to design navigation. Specifically, we're going to take a look at global navigation, primary navigation, local navigation, page names, UI here indicators, and breadcrumbs. So to begin with, we're going to start with an analogy of actually going to a brick and mortar store. Suppose we want to go to a hardware store and we're interested in purchasing a new smart thermometer. Right, so we might enter the store and then we've got an option. We can ask someone right away where it's located, or we can try to look for it ourselves. If you decide to find a clerk and ask them, you might also have to weigh how credible their answer is and whether or not you need to find somebody else, or if you can actually follow their instructions. If you decide to look first, you might look around at the different departments and see which options are available to you to try to figure out where you need to go. Right, so you might see the gardening department and the appliances department. Maybe you see electrical and you think, okay, it's quite possible, smart thermometer could be an electrical. Right, so then once you look at the department, you look down the aisles, you try to find the right aisle. If you find the right aisle, you try to find the product. And maybe you're successful and maybe you're not. Right? And at that point, you're going to have to decide, if you're not successful, do I continue looking? Do I find somebody else to help me? Or do I just leave thoroughly frustrated? And oftentimes you don't leave right away, but if you search many, many times, you may get frustrated and leave. And of course, if you find it, then you'll look for that cash register and pay for it and exit the store. So we have a really similar flow process that we use when we're navigating a website. Usually we're trying to find something very specific. It might be that we're trying to buy an item, just like in our brick and mortar example, or it might be that we're just looking for a piece of information. Right? So when you do enter a website, you have to first decide whether you want to ask or you want to browse. Right? If you decide to ask first, you would use a search box because, of course, there's no person in the website to ask. People who use search boxes predominantly are known as search dominant. These users will almost always go straight for that search box as soon as they enter a site, regardless of which site they go to. And then we have link dominant users. These are the users that almost always try to browse first. And then they'll only use that search option when they run out of links or become sufficiently frustrated. And then there are people that fall in between, right? It depends on our current frame of mind, whether or not we're in a hurry, and whether or not that site's navigation looks comprehensible. If you choose to browse first, you'll do this by making your way through a hierarchy, using signs to guide you. You're going to first look at the homepage for links to the site's main sections. These are like the department signs in the store. And then you're going to select one of these main sections, and from this you'll choose from a list of subsections, which are like the aisle signs in the store. And eventually you'll get to the actual area that you're looking for, which is like finding the product. And of course, eventually, if you can't find what you're looking for, you're going to leave. So just like with brick and mortar stores, with websites, we get frustrated and we might leave, or we might just be convinced that they don't have what we're looking for, and that causes us to leave. So this is a good analogy in a lot of ways. When we're browsing a website, we often feel like we're moving through a physical space. We even use words like surfing, navigating, right? These words suggest to us that we're moving through a physical space. And when we click on a link, we often say that it takes us to a place. Right? So it takes us to a particular page. But web browsing is not like moving through a physical space. First of all, there's no sense of scale. For large sites, you have no sense of how big it is. It could be 50 pages, it could be 10,000 pages. There may be huge sections that are unexplored. However, in a physical store, when you're there, even if you don't explore the entire store, you have a sense of how large it is. You know the ratio of what you've seen to what you haven't seen. And of course, in a website, you don't have this option. You have no way of knowing what that seen to unseen ratio is. And it's hard to know if you've seen everything of interest and when you need to stop looking. You've also got no sense of direction, right? There's no sense of right or left, up or down. You have a little bit of sense of up and down in the hierarchy, but you don't have any of the visual cues that let you know that one thing is next to another. And of course, you've got no sense of location. So in a physical store, we get a sense of the layout of the store. If you look down at the diagrams here that I kind of hand drew, this might be your first attempt to find a particular product through a store. And you wander around, maybe you went up and down an aisle and it wasn't quite right. But the next time you need to get that one, you will go the most direct route right to that item. Because you have a sense of a layout, you know how to take shortcuts, you see signposts. However, in web browsing, we don't have that. So if we know how to get to something, because we got there last time, we will end up having to take the exact same route that we took the first time. It may be very difficult for us to figure out the more direct route to that item. Because there's no physical space, we have to remember the conceptual hierarchy in our heads and retrace it every time. This is why the home page is so important. In a relative sense, it's the one place that is fixed. It is our North Star. Web navigation enables us to compensate for this missing sense of place by creating a sense of there through the site's hierarchy. This makes navigation a critical foundation of every website. And since it is critical, it better be good. So we've got several different purposes for navigation. The first one, of course, is to tell us what is even here, right? It tells us what the site contains. It reveals the content of the site. It also tells us how to use the site. It implicitly tells you where to begin and what your options are. And it should be all the instructions that you need. You'll remember that we talked in a previous lesson about trying to minimize instructions, right? So if you've got a good navigation, it'll be all the instructions you need. And that's a good thing because we know that the users are going to ignore other instructions we give anyways. And it gives us confidence in the site's creators, right? So as you're using a website, users are kind of keeping a mental running tally of whether or not these guys really know what they're doing. And so navigation is an opportunity to create that good impression. You don't want to be having points taken off in your navigation. Users have become very accustomed to navigation conventions. Just like in a grocery store that has signs at the end of every aisle. In a book, you find a table of contents at the beginning. Right? You've got pages, you know the page numbers are going to be in the margins. It's on streets, we know that street signs are going to be in intersections. All of these navigation conventions that happen in the physical world, there are digital equivalents. And users have become very accustomed to knowing that they can look at specific places to find those signs. So here we're showing you a few of these navigation conventions, and we'll talk about more of them in a few slides. All of these items here are primarily part of the persistent navigation, which we now see kind of up here at the top. In addition, you've got local navigation. You've got a page name, not the best location for it, but that is what it is. And then you've got this footer navigation down at the bottom. Right, so that persistent navigation, that local navigation, and that footer navigation really make up a good portion of the navigation you'll find on any site. The persistent navigation, which is also called global navigation, is the set of navigational elements that appear on every page. It provides consistent information so that you know that you're still on the same site. And this consistency also means that you only have to learn it once. So if you know that the search bar is off and to the right corner, you'll know that it's there the entire time. Or in this case, if your shopping bag, it would have been nicer for them to have labeled it cart, but you know that it's in that one place no matter where you go. And this consists of 4 elements. You've got the site ID, utilities, search bar, and then your main sections. You'll find persistent navigation on every page except forms. On these pages, they just need to have the site ID, which is your link to the home page, and any utilities that might be required to fill out the form. Like I said, the site ID is your link to the home page. It's like the building name on the front of a store. And on the web, it not only serves as a link to the home page, it's your primary mode of transportation. Because of this, it really needs to be on every page. It should be very clear when you click on a link that you have left the site, right? And that site ID lets you know that you've left the site because that site ID is now no longer there, but somebody else's site ID is there instead. And it really should look like a site ID. Right? It should be a brand logo or some kind of recognizable graphic. And it should be at the top and usually the left-hand corner if you're English speaking or other left to right speaking languages. This is the logical place to put it because it's the highest thing in the visual hierarchy, or it may be the most prominent thing, although in most cases, if you put it up in the upper left, it can be in the logical place visually without necessarily needing to take up as much space. Or another option is you could make the site ID frame the whole page. In addition to your site ID, you've also got your sections, right? So that's your primary navigation. These are the links to the main sections of the website. In addition to this, you might also see secondary navigation, especially when you click on one of the items in the main section, as you can see here with the DTS menu. Those primary sections, instead of showing you the secondary navigation right below it, could instead reveal a drop-down menu with many options for secondary navigation. Or when you click on one of those items in that main section, it might take you to the section's front page, which then displays a secondary navigation. Some sites like to include the home page as one of the main sections, and that doesn't hurt if you have space. We've also got the utilities. These are those important places that are not really part of the content hierarchy, but still want to be included on the front page. And they can either include things that help the user or information about the publisher, right? So helping the user might be sign in, register, help, sitemap, shopping cart, account profile. Things about the publisher might be the about us, the contact us, the locations. And these should be less prominent than your main sections. Most sites comfortably fit about 4 to 5. Of course, it's going to depend on your site and how big you make those particular icons or labels. And what you should do is really put the most frequently used ones up there at the top in that persistent navigation, and then the less common ones should be moved to the footer navigation. Another thing that you're going to see in the persistent navigation is the search. Don't get fancy with this, right? You should follow the formula. There's a large number of people who are immediately going to look for that search box when they enter your site. So you should have a box and a button, and then either the word search or that magnifying glass. You want to avoid fancy wording, right? People are looking for the word search, so give them that word. You've got instructions you do not need to include, right? You can just say, you can just have that word search, or you can have that magnifying glass. People who have used the internet know how to use a search box, and so these instructions are just unnecessary wording on your site. You should also avoid options. So you will see this on some sites, right, where instead of just letting you search it, like here at IMDb, there's a place where you can now limit your search in scope. We'd caution you to be very wary of letting the user limit their scope. The payoff is rarely worth the space that you need in order to provide that option and the time that the user has to spend thinking about those options. If you want to give users option to limit their scope, the best thing to do is actually to do it in the results page after they've already run their search, right? So you can let them filter the results further if they decide that when they provided that search term, it provided too many responses for them to find what they were looking for. So you can see here, I ignored the options and I just typed in Alice. And when I did that, it allows me to then further filter down by specific items that I might need to. And that would actually be the best way to handle these options. All right, so that's the primary navigation, but what about secondary navigation, tertiary navigation, and beyond? In all honesty, sites tend to have their top 2 levels really well mapped out. And after that, many sites really become kind of ad hoc. There's a lot of reasons for this, right? So multi-level navigation is just hard to do, especially if you have a really large site, 10,000 pages. It's very difficult for you to figure out the navigational system that can be visually displayed for everybody so they can see all of those different pages, right? Of course, the designers are also pressed for time, so in the design process, it's often really only necessary for them to provide those first 2 levels of navigation, what's going to be shown on the home page and maybe the one page below that home page. They're often not as pressured from the design process to put out the lower level navigation. And of course, it doesn't seem as important, right? So it's not primary, and in cases of tertiary and beyond, it's not even secondary. So that often sort of gives it causes it to be on the back burner. And of course, the content for those levels are often not available at the time of the design process, right? So many times people don't have all the details fleshed out of what the website's going to contain. They just know those main sections. So the design often occurs without even knowing what users might need to navigate to. However, this is actually where users spend most of their time. So there needs to be some thought put into it. We really need to plan out our navigation at all levels, not just those first 2 levels. All right, so page names. Every page should have a name. It's just navigating where you are in the highlighting is really not sufficient. So you'll often see the primary navigation will change color for whichever area you clicked on. That's great. It should definitely do that. It's good to know where you are, have that sense of place. But every page needs to have a name, and it really needs to be the same name as the item that you clicked on. Right? That lets the user know that they have arrived in the right location. And the name needs to be in the right place. Right? So it should frame the content that's unique to that page. It shouldn't frame the navigation. It shouldn't frame the ads. By framing the content of that's unique to that page, users know what content belongs under that particular section. The name should be prominent, right? So it should be in a logical place in the visual hierarchy. So with the combination of its size, position, and color, it should be very clear to people that that is the name. So typically it's going to be the largest text on the page. And as I said above, it needs to match what the user clicked. This is so important. So I'm going to give you some examples here. This is the first one. The way I navigated to this particular page is I went to books and then I selected bestsellers. So it does in fact match what I clicked. You can see that it's in the right place in the visual hierarchy. It's at the top of the page. It's the most prominent because it's in all caps and it's a bold color and it's definitely the largest size. So this one's done a pretty good job. It's really framing the content of this entire page. All right, here is another example. This one's a little more crazy of a page. On this one I had clicked on Alice in Wonderland. And for the most part, it does appear that this is the most bold and the largest particular item. So it's pretty clear that this is the title of the page. And what's nice about it is it's pretty clear that this content in here is the content about Alice in Wonderland. Technically, this photo is too. But that this information off here on the right, and even this information down here, is not part of the Alice in Wonderland section. All right, now we've got this particular page. I actually clicked on women and then activewear. It's not clear where the name is on this. in all of these pages, they kind of use part of the word in the title, and this is actually supposed to be the title, Macy's Active, but it doesn't match what I clicked on. Also, because of the way it's designed, despite being so large, the way it's shaped with these graphics, it's actually kind of confusing about whether this is going to be a rotating ad or this is actually the naming of the page. And then this is my final example here. The name of this is actually Women's. It's located up here, so this is actually not a very good location because it's not framing the content that's unique to the page, which is this, but instead it's also framing the local navigation. It's also not very large, so it's not clear in terms of its prominence. It is clear in terms of location, but it's not really clear in terms of its prominence that it's the page name. All right, the next thing that you expect to find is some kind of "you are here" indicator. This is what clearly labels where you are in the navigational hierarchy. Designers tend to have trouble with this, right? They often make it too subtle because in design school we learn that subtle is elegant, right? And so they make it too subtle. And really, to be valuable as a "you are here" indicator, it needs to be very obvious. Right? And you can make it stand out through color, through bolding, through highlighting, doing all of those things. Right? So here's an example here. This one here is too subtle. This "women," hopefully you can see it, is actually slightly grayed out, and that's the highlighting "you are here" indicator for the page that I'm on at the time. If it were red, that would really go nicely with the color scheme and would really pop out. The other one here is Books A Million down below. This is the one where I had clicked on Books Bestsellers, so I'm in the books section under bestsellers. It doesn't highlight it at all, and in fact, because this bargains and gifts and more here have a different color, you almost believe that you're probably in the bargains section. All right, so the last thing I want to talk to you about is breadcrumbs. These are the trail that show you where you are in the navigation. The name hints back to Hansel and Gretel leaving breadcrumbs so that they can find their way. And so you can see here in this particular site that I went to the Best Buy homepage, and I went to audio, and I went to home audio, and then I went to speakers. And it's very clear where I am. The breadcrumbs should be very self-explanatory, and they should include the names for all of the pages that you clicked on. Right? Breadcrumbs help us do two things that users do most often, which is backing up a level and going home. Right? So I can back up immediately one level, or I can back up many levels all the way to home very easily through breadcrumbs. With breadcrumbs, you want to put them at the top. You should use that sign between levels. Right? So what this does is it visually suggests a forward motion to a lower level, which is great. And then you want to boldface the last item. It is boldfaced here, although it's kind of hard to see. That's really a good idea because it lets you know what the current page is, and it kind of distinguishes it from the rest, which are links, because of course you're already there, so it's not a link per se. So in order to test out your navigation, we've got this 3-step test. It's easy to do. You just choose any page on your site at random and print it out. Then you need to hold it at arm's length or squint so you can't really study it closely. And as quickly as possible, you need to try to find the site ID, the page name, the primary navigation or sections, your local navigation, your "you are here" indicators, and the search. If you can do that, then you know you've designed your navigation well. If you can't do that, then you need to go back and revisit it. So in summary, navigation is a key aspect of the user experience. Users need to know where they are and how to find what they're looking for, and navigation helps them do that. And of course, this is true for all HCI applications, not just websites. Right? And websites achieve this ability of giving you that sense of space and showing you where you are through the primary navigation, through page names, through "you are here" indicators, and through breadcrumbs.